Welcome to Chapter 10, Emotional Development and Attachment. In this chapter, there will be a total of 6 videos covering these 6 learning questions, the major sections of the chapter. So let's just launch right into this first learning question. What is emotion, and how do biology and culture shape our emotions? So they have, ran various cross-cultural studies showing that the display and understanding of facial expressions indicates that there are certain basic emotions, and they're listed here: happiness, sadness, fear, anger, interest, and disgust. Now, what indicated that these were basic emotions was that in the cross-cultural studies, they found that these emotions showed up in children of every culture, and they were displayed similarly in children of every culture. So this told us that these emotions, these basic emotions, that they were automatic and unlearned or innate. Uh, they arise very early in development. You can see all of these basic emotions during the first year of life appear on infants' faces. Um, and this leads us to believe that these basic emotions, that they have a biological basis to them. So they are on the nature side of things, that we are basically born with them. Because otherwise, I mean, think about it. I mean, if if these facial expressions of these basic emotions were learned, then in some cultures they would do a smile differently than we do in our culture, or they would show sadness or anger or fear differently, or disgust. I mean, like, but it shows up in the faces of every culture the same way. And so you can see in the picture here, they it's not hard to distinguish the emotions they're being shown. And it turns out it doesn't matter what culture the infant is from. You can recognize the emotions, whether they come from an Asian culture or an African culture or an American culture. um, they're still recognizable by around the world. So basic emotions show up in the first year of life, biological basis. However, we learn, how to control our emotions and when to display them, and how to display them, and which emotions are appropriate in different situations. And these are called display rules. Um, so you learn how to manage and control and shape your emotional expressions based on your culture's display rules. So the actual emotions and the facial expressions that they go along with them, they're biological, but you can learn to control them. So you learn that not to, laugh out loud or have a big smile on your face when you're at a funeral, for instance, within our culture. Whereas in other cultures, it's perfectly fine to be singing and dancing and laughing at a funeral. So how we experience and show emotions can differ from one culture to another. And this is this leads to the development of what's called emotion schemas. So we see the word schema come up, coming from Piaget's cognitive development theory. That, remember, we had schemas for for everything that we know, and emotions are no different. So these are ways of thinking about emotions that affect how we experience and display the emotions. So these emotion schemas will develop differently in each culture based on this, based on that particular society's emotional display rules. An example, there's a good example listed here. I mean, for the longest time, we have raised males within our culture with the message that big boys don't cry. And I think it's actually changing for the better, but certainly it was a message I heard growing up. It was part of our society's or our culture's message. And uh, and so this led to, um, this became not led to, but this became part of the emotional schema of particularly of males growing up that I'm a big boy, so I no longer cry, and the the I guess unintended consequence of teaching this particular message and making it part of the male emotional schema was that males tended to get angry instead when they were had a lot of upset pent up emotions. Instead of crying or letting them out and displaying them, they would get angry. And because I mean, you got to do something with that, with those emotions. And this doesn't only happen in males. I mean, people often reach a state, and because they're very similar feelings, like at times, like being very upset. It's usually, there's a reason for it that you become upset, and it's easy to kind of flip that upset emotion into anger if that's part of your emotional display rule. Um, and if you don't want to cry or be upset. Okay, those are emotion schemas. Um, One way that we begin to understand our emotions is by looking at how others are reacting. When we are uncertain about how we should react, this is called social referencing. It first develops between the ages of 9 to 12 months or so. So just at the end of the first year of infancy. And it's easy to see when it develops. It's any kind of unusual or um, I don't know, I guess unusual situations. I mean, you'll see an infant or toddler, look to their caregiver's face for some kind of clue as to, whether this is a frightening situation or is it a happy situation. Um, I always remember just one particular example from raising my daughter, and it was when she was very young. We started swimming lessons, and initially it was like the parent child ones, and I'd be in the water with her when she was an infant, and just kind of holding her, and then or as she became a toddler, eventually she reached a point where she could go into a class with other kids and without the parents, and it's just always stuck with me. I was sitting on a bench. All the parents are kind of sitting on a bench near the pool, and they were getting these little kids to jump into the water to the instructor. And at that point, my daughter had certainly never jumped into the water on her own without me or her mother being there to catch her. So I just have this picture in my mind of her like the instructor telling her to jump in, and she just kind of turned to look at me with this kind of scared look on her face. And and so I made sure that I gave her a big smile and like, big expression that this is perfectly okay. If I had looked scared as well, if I was feeling scared for her, she probably never would have jumped in the pool. I mean, so they really do take the cues from your face, and so you can keep that in mind when you have a young child that they're going to be reading you, and if you want them to be calm, you need to appear calm yourself. Okay, as children get older and language skills develop better, than conversations with parents also help to shape the way in which children understand and cope with their emotions. This is especially true with what we call emotion coaching parents. And I'm not going to get into that now, but in video 3, I'll talk about emotion coaching versus emotion dismissing parents. And emotion coaching parents help children understand and deal with emotions. So we'll return to that in the 3rd video. Okay, so there are a couple of emotions that specifically, affect our feelings towards others. And I'm talking about, of course, about empathy and sympathy. These two emotions, often seem to get grouped together. Um, some people don't really make a big distinction between them, but they certainly are separate emotions. So I usually, start this section of class by asking students about what the difference is between the two, and which one's more helpful, and certainly, when you understand the true definitions of them. I mean, empathy is a deeper connection with others. It's a deeper type of feeling because you are like connecting your emotions to theirs. Sympathy is more like feeling sorry for others, without necessarily understanding their feeling or having felt it before. I'm going to show you a video that makes the distinction more, and it's one that I like a lot. So let me go there now. It's a short video. Well, a few minutes. Okay.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. So yeah, I really like that idea that empathy is it's a form of connection, um, which which makes a lot of sense. Um, because you can't really experience empathy for somebody if you cannot connect to what they're feeling. Okay, I'm just trying to get back to the PowerPoint. Here we go. Let's go on. Yeah. We're gonna finish this first section talking about secondary emotions. We looked at the basic emotions, the ones that we're born with that are biologically based and show up in the first year of life. This is a very different set of emotions. They're also known as self-conscious emotions. They develop later, usually by the age of 3 or so, and they develop later because they depend on an awareness of self that very young children do not yet possess. Because these are, you know, we call these self-conscious emotions because you have to think about how an event affects your evaluation of yourself. Does this behavior or event like make me feel bad about myself? Does it make me feel good about myself? These types of emotions, embarrassment, pride, shame, guilt, uh, these are emotions that we teach to children. We teach children when they should feel them. So these are not biologically based emotions that we're born with, and these are emotions that we learn within our society or culture. We're taught about how to experience them and when to experience them. And so it's a very different set of emotions. Um, because, I mean, each of these emotions involves either an enhancement of the self, such as in pride, you feel yourself is enhanced, or more of a decrement of the self, where like feeling embarrassed or shame or something, where there's a decrease in your evaluation of yourself. Um, One thing I like to talk about before I leave this is the difference between shame and guilt, because these are also two emotions that sometimes get grouped together, and people just say shame and guilt, or almost interchangeably, but they're very different emotions. The emotion of shame is feeling that you are bad. You're a bad person. I mean, if a child says that I'm a bad boy or I'm a bad girl, I mean, like, it's that they're representing shame. That there's something about them as an individual. They have some kind of personal failure. That they cannot change. So it is the stronger and possibly more damaging of the two emotions, because the person feels bad about who they are. So the feeling of shame is that you are a bad person in some way. And the feeling of guilt is that you did something bad. You performed a bad behavior. Um, so when you feel guilty, you think about the negative aspects of something you have done, or some kind of moral failure you had. Like maybe it was something you didn't do, that you should have. But you can point your finger at a specific time and place or a specific behavior, and so that's correctable. It's like I feel guilty about hitting my sister. Well, if I stop hitting her, I won't feel this way again. I mean, I can correct if I correct that behavior, I can get rid of this negative feeling that shows up sometimes. But if I'm a bad boy, I mean, there's no simple correction to that. I mean, what like, oh, I guess I'll try to be better. But like, I mean, if I'm bad inside, if it's part of who I am, I may live with that feeling for years and years. And it's possible I could live with it for a lifetime. This is why I really do stress to parents or caregivers of young children that they be very careful when they discipline their children for doing some kind of negative behavior. That I ask caregivers and parents to be very specific in punishing the behavior rather than the child as a whole. And when we talk about punishing children, we should be really talking about punishing behaviors, because that's why we say we do punishments or discipline, that we want to change a negative behavior. And so the language that you use with a child makes a big difference. So I would suggest that you never tell a child that they're a bad boy or a bad girl or that they're rotten to the core or any other kind of phrase like that, where you're putting it all on them, or that you really that you certainly don't want to tell them that you hate them or that you stop loving them. I mean, like if it's your own child, I mean, these things, those kind of comments, they're all directed at the child as a person and who they are. We should always be very specific about addressing behaviors. So you can say to a child, I really, really, I really hate what you did, or I really don't like what you did, or I don't love that particular behavior that you did. Um, I mean, but it's about separating behavior from who the person is and making it like a separate thing, a separate entity. And you can actually, enlist the support of the child to help you get rid of that behavior. So you kind of remove it from the child. It's like, I love you, but I really don't like when you draw on the walls, for instance. Um, how can we get rid of that behavior? That's you know I but you make it clear that you love them. It's that particular behavior that you really dislike. And then the child will have ideas about how to get rid of that behavior, because you're not attacking them as a person. You're upset about what they did. And a lot of parents find that difficult to do because they kind of have the attitude that everything a child does is very purposeful, and so like they should be directly angry at the child. And there's nothing wrong with being angry, but once again, I mean, be angry at the behavior, and it makes a big difference. Uh, and it's not just a small little language thing that seems significant. Like in one incident, yeah, it probably doesn't matter that much if I say you're a bad boy, or I say I really don't like you know you drawing on the walls, and but if it's your go-to way of responding to or disciplining the child, it's not one time they're going to hear it, right? During the course of an upbringing, it's going to be hundreds or thousands of times that they hear it. It is the repetition of those messages that really sink in and affect the the evaluation of the self of the child. And children grow up thinking that they're not good, that they're not good people, then they're not good boys or girls. Because of hearing that message over and over again. So it's, although it seems like a small thing, you have to always keep in mind that you know it's if it's a small thing, then do it right. And if you get in the habit of always doing it right, that'll you won't even think twice about it. And You can still get angry, you can still discipline them, you can still, punish them if you wish, but you're just always directed at behavior. I'm punishing that behavior, or I'm angry at that behavior. And it just really does make a difference in the long run. And so you're giving the child guilt. Guilt is considered healthy by experts in developmental psychology. Guilt helps us change our actions. We think about something we did, we want to do it differently. If you shame a child by just telling them what a bad kid they are, there is nothing that they that doesn't motivate them to correct anything. They may say, "Oh, I'll try to be better," but they don't even know what that means. You have to keep it to specific behaviors. Okay, and that will conclude video 1 from chapter 10.